The mahogany-clad sanctum of Judge Thomas smelled of premium cigars and quiet rot. Outside, Ouagadougou's morning heat was already pressing in. Inside this air-conditioned fortress, 3 men murmured like conspirators under stained glass. Thomas nudged up his gold-rimmed spectacles, pale fingers drumming over folders stamped confidential. The French corporate attorney, Dubois, slid a thick envelope across the polished desk, his smile thin as a razor. "The mining contracts must be safeguarded at all costs," he hissed. Thomas inclined his head, eyes hard as frozen steel. "Traoré thinks he can stroll in and overturn decades of law," he sneered, American vowels cutting the air. The third man, a local politician named Sankara, shifted in his leather chair, voice wavering. "Judge, the people adore him. If we push too..." The gavel cracked down. Both men flinched. "The people don't understand international law, Sankara," Thomas said, tone cold, then softer, conspiratorial. "But they will." He listened to the swelling hum beyond the door, chairs scraping, reporters whispering, a city bracing for spectacle. He straightened his black robes, checked his reflection in the window over the bustling streets. Vendors unfurled bright cloth. Children ran toward school. Life marched on like any other morning. In 2 hours, he knew, everything would tilt. Dubois stood, briefcase latched, his expensive suit crumpled by humidity despite the chill. "The fine is engineered to bankrupt any resistance," he said, satisfied. Thomas's smile was predatory, never warming his eyes. 500 million, he murmured. "Even a revolutionary won't outlast that." He lifted the prepared judgment and weighed it in his hand. Today he planned to crush a man bold enough to defy an old order. On the courthouse steps, a tide of red, green, and yellow flags shimmered against the climbing sun. President Ibrahim Traoré stepped from a plain government car, declining the armored convoy his security urged. His fatigues were pressed but modest, a stark contrast to the polished suits of foreign counsel gathering inside. Children had skipped classes to chant his name. Ibrahim paused, right hand over his heart, eyes on the imposing colonial facade. "Today we face our ghosts," he told his aide. Inside the marble corridors, whispers trailed him like shadows. European diplomats huddled, faces taut with expectation. Local journalists pushed forward, cameras blinking. His security detail flowed around him like a shield, but his gaze remained steady. At the heavy wooden doors he paused, feeling the weight of ancestors settle on his shoulders. "Whatever happens," he told his team, "we speak only truth." The courtroom fell to a hush as he entered. Thomas sat high like a relic of empire, robes billowing, papers shuffled with practiced gravity. The gallery was a sea of faces, some hopeful, some afraid, all hungry for history. Ibrahim took the defense table, remaining seated even as the bailiff announced him. His lawyer, a brilliant Burkinabe advocate named Fatou, leaned in to whisper updates, but Ibrahim's eyes were fixed on the bench, reading calculation in the judge's cool stare. 3 sharp blows of the gavel ricocheted up the vaulted ceiling. "This court is now in session," Thomas declared, voice freighted with borrowed centuries. Ibrahim folded his hands, his breathing even. Coups, assassins, backroom pressures. He had stared them down before. He would endure this too. As Thomas began reciting the charges, Ibrahim briefly closed his eyes, sending a silent prayer skyward for his people. The judge cleared his throat with theatrical relish. "President Traoré," he intoned, varnished authority dripping from every syllable. "This court finds you in violation of international mining agreements executed by previous administrations." The gallery stiffened, sensing a trap months in the making. "Penalties for breach of these binding contracts are severe and non-negotiable," he continued, his American accent grating on local ears. Dubois's smile was paper-thin. Numbers danced behind his eyes. Thomas raised the judgment like a blade. "This court hereby orders immediate payment of punitive damages in the amount of..." He paused to savor the moment. 500 million United States dollars. Gasps rolled through the room like thunder across the savannah. A few supporters lurched to their feet, faces stricken. Ibrahim's attorneys traded glances, their carefully honed arguments suddenly flimsy before a financial warhead. Flashbulbs stitched the moment into memory. Thomas hammered for silence. Furthermore, failure to pay within 30 days will incur asset seizure and international sanctions. The snare snapped shut, the noose tightened around the neck of a nation's independence. Satisfaction spread across his face, just as something fierce lit behind Ibrahim's calm. The young president rose. The room fell into deeper quiet, a held breath. "Your Honor, may I address the court?" he asked, voice low yet carrying. Protocol forced Thomas to nod. Though a frown creased his careful mask, Ibrahim didn't advance toward the bench. He walked toward the people. His boots clicked on marble, each step a heartbeat. Sunlight angled through high windows and stretched his shadow long across the colonial tiles. 500 million, he said, and his voice reached every corner. He turned slowly, eyes passing over diplomats and cameras and citizens. For what crime? For placing the people of Burkina Faso before the profits of foreign corporations. Murmurs swelled. Supporters straightened. Thomas tapped the gavel, uneasy. Ibrahim's voice grew steadier, stronger. For choosing sovereignty over servitude dressed up as partnership? The air itself felt charged. Thomas leaned forward despite himself. Du Bois scribbled, the smirk draining from his face. Ibrahim set both hands on the defense table and held the judge's gaze. Before you destroy a nation with your ruling, perhaps this court should hear about the real criminals in this room. Silence snapped tight. Ibrahim drew a manila folder from his jacket, thick, heavy, and opened it with unhurried control. Color fled Du Bois's cheeks. "Your Honor, I present evidence of systematic looting that has bled Africa for decades." Diplomats erupted in whispers. Phones appeared and were promptly hushed by bailiffs. These documents detail secret mining contracts, environmental devastation hidden from public view, and profits siphoned away from the people of Burkina Faso. "Those documents are classified," Du Bois barked, springing up, sweat prickling through his suit. Ibrahim didn't spare him a glance. "Classified," he said, lifting a photograph of scarred land and poisoned river water, "to keep the truth from those who own the gold beneath their feet." The gallery stirred, anger coalescing like storm clouds. "Mr. Du Bois represents corporations that have extracted more than $2 billion from our soil," Ibrahim continued, "and left our children to drink poison." The room convulsed. Gasps, shouts, the staccato of shudders. "Order!" Thomas shouted, voice cracking, but the spark had already caught. Journalists scribbled with frantic purpose, recognizing a conspiracy unraveling from Ouagadougou's pits to Paris boardrooms. "These are the crimes worthy of judgment," Ibrahim said, voice ringing clear. "Theft disguised as investment. Exploitation wrapped in legal documents." Evidence sprawled across the defense table like a map of a crime scene, each page a nail in the coffin of a colonial scheme. Thomas's half-billion decree suddenly looked like extortion wearing a robe. Red crept up his neck. The gallery rose to its feet, some chanting Ibrahim's name, others demanding answers from the shrinking diplomatic rows. Du Bois tried to gather his papers, edging toward the exit. Ibrahim's words cut through the clamor like a blade. This court lacks the moral authority to condemn a people fighting for their freedom. He lifted another sheet, one stamped with an official seal that seemed to drain the last of Thomas's color. "Your Honor, perhaps the court should be aware of your own financial interest in the Curry gold mine." Silence fell heavy. Heads pivoted to Thomas, who looked like a man discovering the floor beneath him had vanished. Du Bois gestured frantically to shut it down. Too late. Bank records show regular payments of $50,000 per month to Thomas Holdings LLC, Ibrahim continued, voice patient and relentless. The gallery exploded, outrage, disbelief, fury braided together. The judge's law clerk, a young Burkinabe woman, stared at her employer with open disgust. Motion to dismiss for judicial conflict of interest. Fatu called above the din. More exhibits landed, a luxury Virginia home, purchased with mining kickbacks over 3 years. Photos flashed across the crowd's phones, the scandal multiplying in real time. Thomas pounded his gavel wild-eyed. These proceedings are out of order, but the words drowned in the rising roar. Du Bois snapped his briefcase shut and fled, abandoning the ally he'd helped corrupt. Sunlight glinted off the beads of sweat gathering on Thomas's brow. Security. Clear the courtroom. Thomas barked. Officers looked at one another. The head of security, a broad-shouldered Burkinabe named Usman, folded his arms. "We serve justice, not thieves," he said, and the room felt the weight of 100 honest officers behind him. Diplomats pushed for the exits, hemmed in by citizens hurling questions sharp as stones. Law books glowered from their shelves, symbolic in a chamber that had shifted underfoot into a people's court. Even the stenographer had stopped typing, allegiance sliding from a tarnished bench to a righteous gallery. Thomas stood alone on an island of wood, a prisoner on his own dais. "Contempt of court," he screamed, and bitter laughter answered him, laughter shaped by years of injury finally speaking back. Chants rolled and rose. Papers lifted and swirled like dry leaves in a gale. "Confess your crimes," a voice shouted, and then many voices shouted it, until the words became a tremor thrumming in the ribs. Thomas stared at the door Du Bois had used to flee, understanding at last that he had been left to face a storm he had helped summon. The colonial architecture that once cowed citizens now seemed to tower above him as witness and judge. Ibrahim stood. Silence returned as if commanded. He walked toward the bench like a general surveying a field already decided. The crowd parted with reverent hush. Elevated no longer as a throne, the bench framed Thomas as a cornered animal. "Your Honor," Ibrahim said, the title dipped in irony. "It's time you stepped down from that bench." The sentence hung in the sunlit air like a verdict. The gallery erupted in cheers. "Come down. Face the people," rose in a single, braided voice. Security did not move to protect the judge. At the foot of the platform, Ibrahim looked up, eyes bright with the fire of African dignity. "You tried to fine me $500 million, he said evenly, "but you cannot put a price on a people's freedom." The courtroom transformed into a forum of direct democracy. Citizens delivered their own verdicts, guilty of theft, guilty of corruption, guilty of betraying justice. The black robes that had once radiated authority now looked like a costume torn from a failed play. Ibrahim climbed one step. Thomas recoiled, chair scraping as he tried instinctively to enlarge the distance. His last incantation broke from him in a ragged shout. "I am still the judge in this court." Laughter rolled back over him like surf. Ibrahim's smile was calm. He took another step, now close enough to see the tremor behind those gold frames. "You were never our judge," he said softly, with all the certainty of truth. "You were their puppet." The room roared. Light seemed to sharpen. The lie collapsed on itself. Thomas dropped his gavel. Its clatter rang like a bell tolling an end. He fled through a back door, shedding robe and counterfeit authority like a thief vanishing into shadow. Sun spilled through the tall windows, gilding a courtroom remade. Not a shrine to colonial procedure, but a symbol of Burkinabe sovereignty. Song rose, older than the empire that built those walls, sung by living throats that would carry its memory forward. Children watched wide-eyed, memorizing the contours of a day they would recount to their grandchildren. The day a young president held up the mirror to power and cracked a masquerade. The $500 million judgment lay irrelevant on the floor, as worthless as the rotten system that birthed it. The people flooded the steps and the streets. News carried across Ouagadougou like fire through dry grass. Market women ululated. Students lifted flags, colors blazing against a flawless sky. Diplomatic cars slunk away like defeated predators, their passengers whispering into phones about plans turned to ash. Foreign reporters who had come to chronicle a fall instead filmed a conspiracy imploding. By noon, the mining contracts that had seemed ironclad at dawn were exposed as instruments of theft. From the courthouse steps, Ibrahim addressed his people. "Today we proved that no sum can purchase the soul of a free nation." The words moved through the crowd like rain across parched fields. What began within four walls spilled into the neighborhoods and would travel to every village in Burkina Faso. Behind him, the courthouse's colonial bones no longer signaled domination. They stood as a monument to truth over lies, justice over greed. Children darted with handmade flags. Their laughter wove into a chorus of liberation. A $500 million trap had become a $5 billion victory counted not in currency but in dignity, sovereignty, and the unbreakable will of Africa. Somewhere, Thomas's gavel would rust in a drawer. Ibrahim's words would echo in books and songs. A dawn that once threatened darkness had instead delivered the brightest light in a generation. Ibrahim Traoré turned a financial ambush into a landmark defeat of judicial corruption. Proof that truth outlasts money and manipulation.